How does manifestation, or the law of attraction, actually work? And can our desires really come true just by thinking about them? Is simply thinking enough to make what we manifest become reality? Or is there more that we need to do? You'll find the answers to all these questions in today's audiobook. This audiobook won't just explain what manifestation is, but will also teach you how to actually practice it, so that all your desires, whether it's money, success, or love, can come into your life. As the audiobook progresses, you'll learn how to develop a clear vision, how to remove fear and doubt, and how to practice self-love. You'll understand how to direct your actions in the right way and how to overcome the challenges presented by the universe to reach your goals. You'll also discover the role gratitude plays during the manifestation process, and this audiobook will guide you on how to truly trust the universe. So, let's get started with the audiobook Manifest 7 Steps to Living Your Best Life. First, let's understand what manifestation actually is and how it works. Manifestation is the idea that your thoughts, beliefs, and actions shape the outcomes you experience in life. At its core, it's not magic or wishful thinking. It's about how your mindset influences your behavior, decisions, and ultimately your results. Think of it this way. Your brain is constantly filtering reality. If you strongly believe something is possible for you, you're more likely to notice opportunities, take action, and persist through challenges. If you believe something isn't possible, you'll often ignore chances or give up early. That difference alone can completely change what you achieve. The book Manifest: 7 Steps to Living Your Best Life presents manifestation not as just think and it will happen, but as a structured process that combines mindset, clarity, and real action. Let's break it down from zero, as if you're completely new to this. You don't drift into your dream life, you decide it. And the moment you truly understand that, something inside you shifts, because suddenly life stops feeling random. It stops feeling like something that is happening to you, and instead it becomes something you are actively shaping, deliberately designing, moment by moment, thought by thought, choice by choice. And that's exactly where this journey begins, with a decision, a moment of honesty, where you stop saying, "I don't know what I want," and start asking yourself a far more powerful question. What do I actually want my life to look like? Because here's the truth most people avoid. You cannot manifest a life you have never clearly imagined. And that's why everything feels unclear, slow, frustrating, because deep down, your vision is blurred, scattered, borrowed from other people's expectations, influenced by what society told you success should look like, shaped by fear rather than desire. And when your vision is unclear, your actions become confused, your energy becomes inconsistent, and your results become unpredictable. So right now, before anything else changes, you have to pause and get honest. Not surface level honest, not, "I want to be successful" honest, but deeply, almost uncomfortably honest. Because vague dreams create vague results. You say you want money, but how much and why, and what would it actually change in your life? And let's make this real, not abstract, not motivational, but real enough that you can see it, feel it, almost step into it. Imagine this. You decide that by the year 2030, by the time you turn 30, you want a bank balance of $500,000. Not a lot of money, not financial freedom, but a clear number, a clear timeline, a clear outcome. Now something shifts immediately because your mind finally has something solid to work with. But clarity doesn't stop at the number. You go deeper. You ask yourself, how does this money come into my life? Do you build a business? Do you grow in a high-income skill? Do you invest consistently? Do you combine multiple income streams? And instead of guessing, you start designing. You begin to imagine your life in detail. You see yourself waking up early, not because you have to, but because you have direction. You see yourself working on something meaningful, something that generates income, whether it's a digital skill, a business, freelancing, investing, or a career that scales. You see your bank account slowly growing, not magically, but steadily, month by month. You feel the discipline, the consistency, the focus. And now, instead of just a dream, you have a pathway. Because if your goal is $500,000 by 2030, you can break it down. You realize that if you have, for example, 5 years, that's $100,000 per year, which means roughly $8,300 per month. Now your brain starts working differently. It starts asking, what skills can generate this kind of income? What opportunities exist around me? What can I learn that has high value? And this is where your vision starts shaping your behavior. Because now, instead of scrolling endlessly, you might start learning something that pays. Instead of avoiding risk, you might start exploring business ideas. Instead of spending without thinking, you start managing your money with intention. And this is where manifestation becomes practical, because your clear vision begins to influence your daily actions. You begin to develop habits that support your goal. You start saving a portion of your income consistently. You start investing, even if it's small in the beginning. You start building multiple streams instead of relying on one. You become more aware of where your time goes, because now time has value. You might wake up earlier. You might reduce distractions. You might surround yourself with people who are also growing. And slowly, your identity begins to shift. You are no longer someone who wants to be rich. You are someone who is building wealth. And that identity change is everything. Because once you see yourself differently, your standards change. You stop making decisions that contradict your goals. You start thinking long-term. You delay short-term pleasure for long-term gain. And even when things don't go perfectly, even when progress feels slow, you don't quit, because your vision is clear. You know where you're going. And that clarity keeps you moving. Now go even deeper into the visualization. See yourself in 2030. Open your banking app. See that number, $500,000. Pause there. Don't rush it. Feel what that means. Not just financially, but emotionally. The sense of security, the freedom to make choices, the confidence in your ability to create, the peace of knowing you built this step by step. And then ask yourself, who did I have to become to reach this point? Disciplined, focused, patient, resilient, financially aware, growth-oriented. And now the most important question. How can I start becoming that person today? Because this is the real secret of manifestation. You don't wait to become that person after you achieve the goal. You become that person first, and the goal follows. And as you sit with this example, as you walk through it step by step, you begin to understand something powerful. This is what clarity looks like. This is what real visualization feels like. It's not vague. It's not just positive thinking. It's detailed. It's specific. It's emotional. It's connected to action. And that's why it works. Because your mind now has direction. Your actions now have purpose. Your energy now has focus. And everything you do starts aligning with that vision. And that's what most people miss. They think manifestation is about wishing. But it's actually about seeing so clearly that you can no longer act randomly. And as you return to your own life, your own desires, your own vision, you start to realize that the same level of clarity is available to you. You don't have to copy this example. You don't have to choose money. But whatever you choose, you must define it this clearly. Because without clarity, there is no direction. Without direction, there is no consistent action. And without action, there is no result. So you don't just say, I want more. You define what more means. You build it in your mind. You experience it before it exists. You connect it to who you need to become. And then you start showing up as that person. Because manifestation isn't something that happens outside of you. It begins inside you, in your thoughts, in your identity, in your daily choices. And as you continue this process, returning again and again to your vision, refining it, feeling it, living it in your mind before it exists in your reality, you start to notice that your direction becomes sharper, your decisions become easier, your doubts become quieter. Because clarity removes confusion. And when there is no confusion, there is movement. And movement, consistent, intentional movement, is what turns vision into reality. So you don't rush this. You don't treat it as a one-time exercise. You come back to it. You sit with it. You expand it. You question it. You deepen it. Because the clearer your vision becomes, the more powerful your manifestation becomes. And slowly, almost quietly, your life begins to reorganize itself around that clarity. Your focus sharpens. Your habits shift. Your energy aligns. And what once felt distant starts to feel closer. Not because it magically appeared overnight, but because you are no longer wandering in uncertainty. You are moving with direction. And direction changes everything. So take a moment now and ask yourself, not casually, but seriously, what do you truly want? Not the safe answer, not the expected answer, but the honest one. And once you find it, don't look away. Stay with it. Build it. See it. Feel it. Because this example you just walked through, this is the way of clear vision. This is visualization done right. Not fantasy, but focused imagination tied to action. And this is where it all begins. Not out there in the world, but here, inside your mind, where every reality is first created before it is ever lived. Fear is quiet, but it controls everything. Doubt is invisible, but it decides how far you go. And if you don't face them, if you don't understand them, if you don't learn how to move through them, then no matter how clear your vision becomes, no matter how powerful your goals are, you will always feel like you are standing still, like something unseen is holding you back, like you are capable of more, but somehow never fully stepping into it. And you've felt that, haven't you? That hesitation, that second voice in your mind that whispers just as you're about to move forward, telling you to slow down, to be careful, to not expect too much, to not risk too much, to stay where things feel familiar, even if that familiarity is uncomfortable, even if it keeps you stuck. Because fear doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like logic. Sometimes it sounds like responsibility. Sometimes it disguises itself as being realistic. And that's what makes it so powerful, because you don't even realize it's there, shaping your choices, shrinking your actions, quietly pulling you away from the life you're trying to create. And as you sit with that realization, as you begin to notice how often fear has influenced your decisions, something deeper starts to surface: doubt. That subtle, persistent question that lives in the background of your thoughts. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if this doesn't work for me? And the more you listen to that voice, the more convincing it becomes. But here's the truth you need to understand, not intellectually, but deeply, emotionally. Fear and doubt are not facts. They are patterns. They are learned responses, built over time through experiences, through conditioning, through moments where things didn't go as planned, where you were judged, rejected, disappointed, and your mind, trying to protect you, decided to create a system, a way of keeping you safe by keeping you small. Because in your mind, small feels safe. Invisible feels safe. Not trying feels safe. But safe is not where your desired life exists. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because instead of trying to eliminate fear, which is impossible, you start to change your relationship with it. You stop asking, how do I get rid of fear? And you start asking, how do I move forward despite it? And as that question lands, something practical begins to unfold, because now you're not just thinking emotionally, you're thinking directionally. And this is where you bring your vision back into the picture, but this time, with honesty about what it will demand from you. So let's make it real again. Imagine your goal is to have a bank balance of $500,000 by the year 2030, by the time you turn 30. Clear, specific, defined. But this time, instead of just imagining the success, you also face the resistance that will come with it. Because the moment you set a goal like that, fear reacts. It says that's too big. Doubt follows. People like you don't reach that. And this is where most people stop. Not because the goal is impossible, but because the internal resistance feels uncomfortable. But now, instead of stepping back, you lean in. You ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of in this goal? Are you afraid that you won't earn enough? Are you afraid that you'll try and fail? Are you afraid that you'll look foolish if it doesn't work? Are you afraid that you don't have the right skills? And when you get specific, something powerful happens. Fear stops being this giant, overwhelming force and starts becoming a list of solvable problems. Because if you're afraid of not earning enough, then the solution becomes learning high-income skills. If you're afraid of failing, then the solution becomes reframing failure as learning. If you're afraid of judgment, then the solution becomes caring less about opinions and more about results. And suddenly, your goal doesn't feel impossible anymore. It feels challenging, but actionable. Now let's go deeper into this same example. $500,000 by 2030. Break it down. You might need around $100,000 per year over 5 years. And when you see that number, doubt might whisper again. That's too much. But instead of believing it, you question it. You ask, what would someone who earns this kind of money actually do? Maybe they build a business. Maybe they develop a high-paying skill like coding, marketing, sales, or content creation. Maybe they combine income streams, freelancing, investing, side projects. And now, instead of feeling overwhelmed, you start exploring. And this is where action begins to break fear. Because the more you learn, the more you try, the more you experiment, the less power fear has. Because fear thrives in inaction. Doubt grows in uncertainty. But action, even small action, weakens both. So you start small. You pick one skill. You commit to learning it daily. At first, doubt will still be there. It will say, you're not improving fast enough. But you keep going. You practice. You build. You fail. You learn. And slowly, your confidence begins to grow. Not because someone told you that you're capable, but because you're proving it to yourself. And that's the difference. Real confidence is earned through action. Now visualize again. You're a year into your journey. Your income has started increasing. Not dramatically, but noticeably. And fear shows up again. This time it says, what if this doesn't last? But now you're different. You don't panic. You don't stop. You remind yourself, I've built this once, I can build it again. And that belief keeps you steady. You continue building skills. You continue saving. You continue investing. And over time, your bank balance grows. 10, 0, 0, 0. 50, 0, 0, 0. 100, 0, 0, 0. And each milestone strengthens your belief. Each step forward weakens doubt. Because now, you're not imagining success, you're experiencing progress. And that changes your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to get rich. You see yourself as someone who is building wealth. And that identity shift is what carries you through the difficult moments. Because there will be setbacks. There will be failures. There will be moments where things don't work. And in those moments, the old version of you would have stopped. But now you don't. Because you understand something deeper. You understand that fear is not a stop sign. It's part of the path. You understand that doubt is not truth. It's just a thought. And you keep moving. Step by step. Day by day. Year by year. Until one day, you reach that moment. In 2030, you open your account, and you see it. $500,000. And it doesn't feel like luck. It doesn't feel like magic. It feels earned. It feels built. It feels like the result of every moment you chose courage over comfort, action over hesitation, belief over doubt. And as you sit in that moment, you realize something powerful. The biggest challenge was never the goal itself. It was becoming the person who could achieve it. And that person is someone who learned how to move through fear, who learned how to act despite doubt, who learned how to keep going even when things felt uncertain. And as you come back to the present, back to where you are right now, you begin to understand that this example is not just about money. It's about perspective. It's about realizing that every goal will trigger fear. Every step forward will bring doubt. But those things are not there to stop you. They are there to test whether you're willing to grow. And if you are, if you keep showing up, if you keep learning, if you keep moving forward even when it feels uncomfortable, then slowly, steadily, your reality begins to change. Not all at once, not overnight, but in a way that is real, in a way that lasts. And that's when you start to feel it. That quiet shift, that steady belief, that sense that maybe, just maybe, the life you once thought was out of reach is actually possible. And that feeling, that quiet, grounded sense of possibility, is where everything begins to change. Because the moment you stop letting fear and doubt decide is the moment your life finally starts moving in the direction you've always imagined. You cannot hate yourself into a life you love. You cannot criticize yourself into becoming confident. You cannot build a powerful reality on a foundation that is constantly tearing you down. And as that truth settles in, quietly but firmly, you begin to notice something that may have always been there, something subtle but deeply influential. The way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening, the tone, the language, the quiet judgments, the constant evaluations, the moments where you fall short and immediately turn inward with frustration instead of understanding, with harshness instead of patience. Because even after recognizing fear, even after choosing to move through doubt, there is still one force that quietly shapes everything: your relationship with yourself. And if that relationship is built on criticism, on comparison, on never feeling like you are enough, then every step forward feels heavier than it should, every success feels smaller than it deserves, and every failure feels more personal than it actually is. So as you continue this journey, as you begin to move beyond fear and doubt, you are naturally brought to something deeper, something more foundational: the way you treat yourself. Because manifestation is not just about what you want to create out there. It's about the environment you create within. And if your inner world is filled with negativity, with self-judgment, with constant pressure to be perfect, then no matter how clearly you visualize your future, no matter how aligned your actions become, there will always be resistance, always be friction, always be something pulling you back. And that's why self-love is not optional. It's essential, not as a luxury, not as something you get to later, but as something you build now, intentionally, consistently, even when it feels unfamiliar, even when it feels uncomfortable. Because for many people, self-love doesn't come naturally. It feels awkward. It feels forced. It even feels undeserved. And that's okay. Because self-love is not a feeling you wait for. It's a practice, something you choose again and again until it becomes part of who you are. And it begins in the smallest, simplest moments. In the way you respond to yourself when things don't go as planned. In the way you talk to yourself when you make a mistake. In the way you hold yourself when you feel overwhelmed. Because right now, without even realizing it, you may have a habit of turning against yourself. You make one mistake, and you replay it. You fall short once, and you label yourself. You compare yourself to someone else, and you diminish your own progress. And over time, those small moments build into a pattern where you become your own harshest critic. And that pattern quietly shapes your reality. Because if you don't feel worthy, if you don't feel deserving, if you don't feel enough, you will unconsciously reject the very things you are trying to manifest. You will hesitate. You will doubt. You will self-sabotage, not because you're incapable, but because, deep down, you don't believe you deserve it. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because instead of trying to fix yourself, instead of constantly trying to become better, you begin by accepting yourself as you are. Not as an excuse to stay the same, but as a foundation to grow from. Because real growth doesn't come from shame. It comes from support. So you start to change the way you respond to yourself. When you make a mistake, instead of saying, "I'm so stupid," you pause and you ask, "What can I learn from this?" When you feel behind, instead of saying, "I'll never catch up," you remind yourself, "I'm moving at my own pace." When you feel overwhelmed, instead of pushing yourself harder, you give yourself space to breathe. And these small shifts, they may not feel dramatic at first, but over time, they begin to reshape your internal world. You begin to feel safer within yourself. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to realize that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. And that realization is powerful, because now you are no longer chasing success to prove your worth. You are creating success from a place of worth. And that changes everything. Because when you value yourself, your standards rise. Not out of pressure, but out of respect. You start making choices that support your growth. You start setting boundaries that protect your energy. You start saying no to things that drain you, and yes to things that align with you. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you genuinely care about your well-being. And as that care deepens, your relationship with yourself becomes stronger, more stable, more compassionate, more honest. And from that place, manifestation begins to feel different. It's no longer about chasing something outside of you. It's about aligning with what already feels right within you. Because when you love yourself, you naturally begin to believe that you deserve good things. You begin to expect them, not in an entitled way, but in a grounded, quiet way. And expectation shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. So without forcing anything, without pushing too hard, your actions begin to align with your desires. You take better care of yourself. You show up more consistently. You recover more quickly from setbacks. And slowly, your life begins to reflect that shift. But self-love is not just about how you treat yourself in good moments. It's about how you hold yourself in difficult ones. Because there will be days when you feel off. Days when you doubt yourself again. Days when old patterns resurface. And in those moments, the real work begins. Because it's easy to love yourself when everything is going well. But can you still choose yourself when it's not? Can you still be kind to yourself when you fall short? Can you still support yourself when you feel like giving up? Because that consistency, that commitment to showing up for yourself no matter what, is what transforms self-love from an idea into a reality. And as you practice this, as you continue to meet yourself with patience instead of pressure, with understanding instead of judgment, something begins to settle inside you. A sense of stability, a sense of peace, because you are no longer fighting yourself. You are working with yourself. And that inner alignment is where real power comes from. Because when your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions are all working together, instead of pulling in different directions, your energy becomes focused, clear, strong. And that energy influences everything. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you respond to challenges, the way others perceive you. Because people can feel it. They can feel when you are comfortable in your own skin. They can feel when you respect yourself. And that changes your interactions. It changes your opportunities. It changes your reality. But more importantly, it changes how you experience your life. Because now, even before anything external shifts, you feel different. Lighter, calmer, more grounded. And that internal shift creates space. Space for growth. Space for possibility. Space for new experiences to enter your life. And as you continue to build this relationship with yourself, as you continue to practice self-love in small, consistent ways, you begin to notice something subtle but powerful. You stop seeking validation from the outside. You stop needing constant approval because you are no longer empty. You are no longer looking for someone or something to complete you. You feel whole. And from that place of wholeness, your desires become clearer, more authentic, more aligned, because they are no longer driven by lack. They are driven by purpose. And that's when manifestation becomes truly powerful. Because now, you are not trying to fill a void. You are expanding from a place of fullness. You are creating not because you feel incomplete, but because you are ready to grow. And that shift changes the entire experience. Because now, the journey itself becomes meaningful. The process becomes fulfilling. And the outcomes become a reflection of who you are, not a definition of your worth. So you keep going. You keep practicing. You keep choosing yourself, even in small ways. Because you understand now, deeply and clearly, that the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for everything else. And as that relationship strengthens, as it becomes more supportive, more compassionate, more aligned, your life begins to respond. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily, consistently, in ways that feel real, in ways that last. And as you sit with that, as you feel that quiet sense of alignment building within you, you begin to realize something that once may have felt out of reach. You are already becoming the person who can create the life you desire. Not someday, not in the future, but now, in the way you think, in the way you speak, in the way you treat yourself when no one else is watching. And that is where true manifestation begins. Not in the world outside, but in the way you choose to love yourself, fully, honestly, and without condition. You don't get what you want, you get what you repeatedly do. You don't manifest through thoughts alone, you manifest through aligned action. And no matter how clear your vision is, no matter how deeply you believe in it, if your daily behavior doesn't match it, nothing changes. And as that realization lands, it may feel a little uncomfortable, because now the focus shifts away from dreaming, away from imagining, away from planning, and moves directly into something far more real, far more confronting: how you actually live your day. Because it's easy to visualize a powerful future. It's easy to feel motivated for a moment. But what truly defines your life is what you do when that motivation fades. And this is where most people quietly fall out of alignment. They say they want success, but their habits don't support it. They say they want growth, but they avoid discomfort. They say they want change, but they repeat the same patterns every day. And not because they are incapable, but because their behavior is still tied to their old identity. So even though their vision has changed, their actions haven't. And that creates a gap between who you are and who you say you want to become. And that gap is where frustration lives. Because you can feel your potential, but you're not fully stepping into it. And this is where everything begins to shift again. Because instead of asking, "What do I want?" you start asking a more powerful question. If I already had the life I want, how would I behave today? And you don't answer that casually. You sit with it. You visualize it. You step into that version of yourself. Because the version of you who has already manifested your goals moves differently, thinks differently, chooses differently. And as you begin to see that version clearly, something starts to click. You realize that the future you is not doing extraordinary things. They are doing ordinary things consistently. They wake up with intention. They manage their time. They focus on what matters. They follow through. They don't wait to feel like it. They act because it aligns with who they are. And now, instead of trying to become that person overnight, you start with something simple. You borrow their behavior. Just for today. Just one decision at a time. And this is where alignment begins. Not in big, dramatic changes, but in small, repeated actions. Because your life is not shaped by what you do once. It's shaped by what you do daily. So you start paying attention. You notice your habits. You notice where your time goes. You notice the moments where you say you'll do something and don't. And instead of judging yourself, you become aware. Because awareness creates choice. And choice creates change. Now let's make this real again. Grounded, practical, something you can actually see. Imagine your vision is still the same. Building a bank balance of $500,000 by the time you turn 30. Clear. Defined. But now the focus is different. Now it's not about imagining the end result. It's about aligning your behavior with it. So you ask yourself, if I already had this level of wealth, how would I behave today? Would you sleep through your mornings? Or would you wake up with purpose? Would you spend hours consuming content or creating something valuable? Would you avoid learning new skills or actively invest in your growth? Would you spend money impulsively or manage it intentionally? And as you answer honestly, you begin to see the difference. Because the version of you who reaches that goal is not lucky. They are disciplined, focused, consistent. And that means your daily actions need to reflect that. So you begin to shift. Not everything at once, but one habit at a time. You start managing your time more intentionally. Even if it's just an extra hour a day focused on something productive, learning, building, improving. You start developing skills that actually create value. Because income is not random. It's tied to the value you can offer. So you invest in yourself. You learn. You practice. You improve. And at first, it feels slow. It feels uncertain. But you keep going. Because now your behavior is aligned with your vision. You also begin to change how you handle money. You become aware of your spending. You start saving consistently, even if the amount is small. Because consistency matters more than size in the beginning. And over time, that habit builds. You begin to think long-term. You start exploring ways to grow your money, investing, building assets, creating income streams. And slowly, your relationship with money changes. From reactive to intentional. From emotional to strategic. And as these small behaviors stack, something powerful begins to happen. Your identity starts to shift. Because identity is built through repetition, through evidence, through what you consistently do. So as you continue showing up, even in small ways, you begin to see yourself differently. You are no longer someone who wants success. You are someone who acts in alignment with success. And that identity reinforces your behavior. It creates a loop where your actions strengthen your belief, and your belief strengthens your actions. And that's where momentum begins. But alignment is not just about discipline. It's also about honesty. Because there will be moments where you fall out of alignment. Days where you procrastinate. Days where you avoid. Days where you go back to old habits. And in those moments, the goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. You catch it. You acknowledge it. And you return. Because consistency doesn't mean never failing. It means not staying stuck. And that's what separates people who manifest their goals from those who don't. Not talent, not luck, but the ability to keep realigning. Again and again. And as you continue this process, something begins to settle within you. A sense of control, a sense of direction. Because now, your life is no longer driven by impulse. It's guided by intention, and that changes how you experience everything. Because even when results are slow, you feel progress. Even when things are uncertain, you feel grounded. because you know that your behavior is aligned. And alignment creates results over time. Not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. Because if your actions consistently match your vision, your reality has no choice but to follow. And as you sit with that, as you reflect on your own life, your own habits, your own patterns, you begin to see clearly where you are aligned and where you are not. Not as a judgment, but as an opportunity. Because every moment gives you a chance to choose differently, to act differently, to move closer to the person you are becoming. And the more you choose alignment, the easier it becomes. Because behavior shapes identity, and identity shapes behavior, until eventually, what once felt difficult becomes natural. What once required effort becomes automatic. And that's when you know something has truly changed. Not just your goals, not just your thoughts, but you. And as that shift deepens, as your actions continue to reflect your vision, as your daily life begins to mirror the future you once imagined, you start to realize something powerful. Manifestation is not about waiting. It's about becoming. Becoming someone whose habits, choices, and actions are so aligned with their vision that the outcome is no longer a question of if. It becomes a matter of time. And that realization, that quiet certainty, is where your power truly begins to unfold. It won't get easier, it will get real. It won't always feel magical. Sometimes it will feel like resistance. And just when you think you're moving forward, something will try to pull you back. And that's the moment most people misunderstand. Because as you begin aligning your behavior, as you start showing up differently, as your actions slowly begin to reflect your vision, you expect progress to feel smooth. You expect things to start working immediately. You expect clarity to remove struggle. But instead, you encounter friction, unexpected delays, rejections, setbacks, moments where things don't go the way you planned. And it feels confusing because you start asking yourself, if I'm doing everything right, why is this happening? And this is where a deeper understanding begins to unfold. Because what feels like resistance is often a test, not in some mystical, abstract way, but in a very real, grounded sense. Life responds to who you are becoming by presenting situations that ask one simple question. Are you serious about this? Because it's easy to say you want something. It's easy to feel motivated in the beginning. But what happens when things don't go your way? What happens when your effort doesn't immediately pay off? What happens when you feel tired, uncertain, even discouraged? Do you stay consistent, or do you retreat? And this is where the real separation happens. Not between those who are talented and those who are not, but between those who persist and those who stop. So instead of seeing challenges as signs that something is wrong, you begin to see them as part of the process, as checkpoints, moments designed to strengthen your commitment, your discipline, your belief. And as you shift your perspective in this way, something changes internally. You stop taking setbacks personally. You stop interpreting them as failure. And you start asking a different question. What is this moment asking me to become? Because every challenge carries a lesson. Every delay carries a demand for patience. Every rejection carries an opportunity to improve. And when you begin to approach life this way, you no longer feel stuck when things go wrong. You feel guided, not toward comfort, but toward growth. And let's bring this back into something real again, something you can see clearly, something you can feel yourself stepping into. Imagine you are still on that path, building toward a bank balance of $500,000 by the time you turn 30. You've started aligning your behavior. You've begun learning skills. You've committed to consistency. And for a while, things feel good. You're making progress. You're gaining confidence. And then something happens. Maybe a project fails. Maybe you lose money. Maybe an opportunity you were counting on disappears. And in that moment, the old voice returns. This isn't working. You're wasting your time. Maybe you're not cut out for this. And this is the test. Not the situation itself, but your response to it. Because you have two choices in that moment. You can interpret it as proof that you should stop, or you can interpret it as part of the process. And that choice determines everything. Because if you stop, the story ends there. But if you continue, if you learn, if you adjust, if you keep moving forward, the story evolves. So instead of reacting emotionally, you pause. You step back. You look at the situation objectively. You ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Maybe you realize that your strategy needs improvement. Maybe you recognize a gap in your skills. Maybe you see that you rushed a decision. And instead of seeing that as failure, you see it as feedback. Because feedback moves you forward. And as you apply those lessons, as you refine your approach, something begins to shift. You become sharper, more aware, more capable, and slowly you begin to rebuild, stronger than before. And this pattern repeats, again and again. Progress, challenge, adjustment, growth. And each time you move through it, your resilience increases. Your confidence deepens. Because now, you're not just relying on things going well. You're relying on your ability to handle when they don't. And that's real power. Because when you know you can recover, when you trust yourself to figure things out, when you believe in your ability to adapt, fear loses its grip. Because the worst-case scenario no longer feels like the end. It feels like a step. And as you continue on this path, something else begins to happen. Your patience grows. Because you start to understand that meaningful results take time. That real success is not built overnight. That the life you're creating requires consistency, discipline, and endurance. And instead of rushing the process, you begin to respect it. You begin to trust it. Because you see how each challenge is shaping you. How each delay is preparing you. How each test is strengthening you. And this creates a deeper sense of calm, a steadiness. Because you are no longer shaken by temporary setbacks. You are focused on long-term growth. And as that mindset settles in, your actions become more consistent, less reactive, more intentional. You stop jumping from one idea to another. You stop quitting when things get hard. You stay with the process. You commit. And that commitment compounds. Over time, it builds momentum. And that momentum carries you forward. Until one day, you begin to notice something different. The challenges don't feel as heavy. The setbacks don't feel as discouraging. Because you've changed. You've grown. You've developed the ability to move through difficulty without losing direction. And that's when things begin to shift externally as well. Opportunities start to appear. Your skills start to pay off. Your efforts begin to show results. Not because things suddenly became easy, but because you became stronger. And as you move closer to your goal, as your bank balance grows, as your life begins to reflect the vision you once imagined, you look back at those difficult moments, those setbacks, those challenges, and you realize they were never there to stop you. They were there to prepare you, to shape you into the person who could handle what you were asking for. Because achieving a goal is not just about reaching a number. It's about becoming someone who can sustain it, who can manage it, who can continue growing beyond it. And that requires strength, discipline, resilience. And those qualities are built through tests, through moments where you are asked to choose comfort or growth, ease or effort, short-term relief or long-term progress. And each time you choose growth, you move forward, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment, even if the results are not immediate, because growth is happening beneath the surface, in your mindset, in your habits, in your identity, and that internal growth eventually reflects externally. It has to, because your life is a reflection of who you are becoming. And as you continue to move through these tests, as you continue to show up, to learn, to adapt, to persist, something begins to solidify within you. A quiet certainty. A deep belief, not based on hope, but based on experience. That no matter what happens, you will find a way. And that belief is what carries you forward. Through uncertainty, through difficulty, through the moments where others might stop. Because you understand something now that you didn't before. The path to your desired life is not free of challenges. It is built through them. And as you accept that, as you embrace it, as you stop resisting the process and start working with it, everything begins to feel different. More grounded, more real, more within your control. Because now, you are not waiting for the perfect conditions. You are becoming the kind of person who creates results regardless of conditions. And that shift, that internal transformation, is what truly changes your life. Because the moment you stop seeing challenges as obstacles and start seeing them as part of your growth, is the moment you become unstoppable. Not because life becomes easy, but because you become stronger than anything that tries to stop you. And as you sit with that, as you feel that strength building within you, as you recognize your ability to keep going, to keep growing, to keep moving forward no matter what, you begin to understand something deeply, something that stays with you. You were never being tested to fail. You were being shaped to succeed. And the more you trust that process, the more your life begins to unfold in ways that once felt impossible, now becoming not just possible, but inevitable. Gratitude is not polite, it's powerful. Gratitude is not something you say, it's something you feel. And if you only feel it when things go right, you are missing where its real strength lives. And as you move through everything you've begun to understand, as you've faced fear, aligned your behavior, and learned to move through resistance instead of running from it, you arrive at something quieter, something softer, but just as powerful. Because after all the effort, after all the discipline, after all the pushing forward, there is still a question that shapes your experience of life. Can you appreciate where you are, while still moving toward where you want to be? And that's where most people struggle, because they think gratitude means settling. They think it means becoming comfortable with less. They think it means giving up ambition. But that's not what gratitude is. Gratitude is not the absence of desire. It's the absence of resistance to the present moment. And when you truly understand that, something shifts inside you. Because now, you are no longer fighting your current reality while trying to create a new one. You are working with it. You are grounded in it. And that grounded energy is what makes your growth sustainable. Because without gratitude, your journey becomes exhausting. You achieve one thing and immediately feel like it's not enough. You reach one milestone and your mind jumps to the next. You are constantly chasing but never arriving. And even if you reach your goals, you feel empty because you trained your mind to focus only on what's missing. So now, instead of waiting for everything to be perfect before you feel grateful, you begin to practice it in the middle of the process. Not when things are ideal, but when they are real. When progress is slow. When results are uncertain. When you're still figuring things out. And this is where gratitude becomes transformational, because it changes how you see your life. It shifts your focus from lack to presence, from what you don't have to what you do. And that shift affects everything. Your energy, your mindset, your decisions. Because what you focus on expands in your awareness. So if you constantly focus on what's missing, your life feels incomplete. But if you begin to notice what's already here, what's already working, what's already growing, your experience changes. Even if your circumstances haven't fully changed yet. And this is where gratitude connects deeply with manifestation. Because manifestation is not just about creating more. It's about recognizing what already exists and building from there. And let's bring this into something real again, something grounded, something you've already begun to walk through. Imagine you are still on that journey, working toward your goal of building a bank balance of $500,000 by the time you turn 30. You're putting in the work. You're learning. You're growing. But you're not there yet. And it's easy, in that phase, to feel frustrated, to feel like you're behind, to feel like it's taking too long. And that's where gratitude becomes your anchor. Because instead of saying, "I'm not there yet," you begin to say, "I'm further than I was." You start noticing the progress, the skills you've developed, the discipline you've built, the awareness you've gained. And those things matter because they are the foundation of your future success. So instead of ignoring them, you acknowledge them. You appreciate them. And that appreciation changes how you feel. It brings a sense of calm, a sense of confidence. Because now, you're not just focused on the distance ahead. You're aware of the distance you've already covered. And that awareness fuels your motivation in a healthier way. Not through pressure, but through appreciation. Now take this even deeper. Gratitude is not just about big things. It's about small moments. Because your life is made of moments. The quiet ones. The ordinary ones. The ones you usually overlook. Like the fact that you have time to improve. The fact that you have access to knowledge. The fact that you are capable of learning, of growing, of changing. And when you begin to notice these things, truly notice them, not as a checklist, but as a feeling, something shifts in your energy. You feel more present, more grounded, more connected to your life. And that presence removes resistance. Because resistance comes from constantly wanting things to be different. But gratitude allows you to accept what is, while still working toward what could be. And that balance is powerful. Because now, your growth is not driven by dissatisfaction. It's driven by alignment. And that feels different, lighter, more sustainable. Now there's an important layer here that most people miss. Gratitude without caveats. Meaning, you don't say, "I'll be grateful when." You don't say, "I'll appreciate my life once I reach my goal." Because that keeps you stuck in the future. And life is happening now. So instead, you practice gratitude without conditions. Without waiting. Without needing everything to be perfect. You appreciate where you are, as it is. Even if it's not where you want to be yet. And that doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop resisting. And when you stop resisting, your energy becomes clearer. Your mind becomes calmer. Your actions become more focused. Because you are no longer distracted by frustration. You are grounded in the present. And that grounding improves everything. Your decisions become more thoughtful. Your reactions become more controlled. Your perspective becomes more balanced. And over time, that changes your results. Because you are no longer acting from stress or scarcity. You are acting from clarity. And clarity leads to better choices, better habits, better outcomes. Now imagine again, you reach that point. You've built your wealth. You've achieved your goal. $500,000 in your account. But this time, the feeling is different. Because you didn't spend the entire journey feeling like you were lacking. You didn't rush through your life trying to escape the present. You experienced the process. You appreciated the growth. You noticed the small wins. And because of that, the success feels deeper, more meaningful, more fulfilling. Because it's not just about the result. It's about the journey you lived along the way. And as you come back to this moment, right now, where you are, with everything you have, everything you've learned, everything you're becoming, you begin to understand something quietly powerful. Gratitude is not something you practice once. It's something you return to, again and again, in the middle of effort, in the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of growth, because it keeps you grounded. It keeps you present. It keeps you aligned. And as you continue this journey, as you keep moving forward, as you keep building, learning, growing, becoming, gratitude becomes part of who you are. Not forced, not artificial, but natural. Because you begin to see your life differently, not as something that is lacking, but as something that is unfolding, step by step, moment by moment. And in that awareness, in that quiet appreciation of what is, while still moving toward what could be, you find something deeper than success. You find peace. And from that place, everything you create feels more meaningful, more real, more complete, because you are no longer chasing life. You are living it. Envy is not your enemy, it's your signal. Comparison is not your weakness, it's your compass. And the moment you stop running from it is the moment it starts guiding you. And as that idea settles in, almost quietly, almost unexpectedly, you begin to notice something you may have ignored for a long time. That subtle feeling, that small tightening in your chest when you see someone else doing what you wish you were doing. When you notice someone living a life that looks closer to the one you imagine for yourself. When you scroll, observe, compare, and feel that uncomfortable mix of admiration and frustration. Because envy is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself clearly. It hides behind thoughts like, why not me? Or they're just lucky, or I could do that too if I had what they have. And most of the time, you try to push it away. You tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way. You try to ignore it. Or worse, you turn it into negativity, judging others, dismissing their success, convincing yourself that it doesn't matter. But deep down it does. Because envy only appears when something resonates with you. You don't envy things you don't care about. You don't feel that pull toward lives that don't align with you. So instead of seeing envy as something negative, something to avoid, you begin to look at it differently. You begin to ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? Because hidden inside envy is clarity. It points directly toward what you desire. Not what you say you want, but what you truly feel drawn to. And as you begin to explore that, honestly, without judgment, without shame, something starts to open up. You realize that envy is not telling you that you are lacking. It's showing you what is possible. It's showing you a version of life that exists and that you can move toward. And that realization changes everything. Because now, instead of shrinking when you compare yourself to others, you become curious. Instead of feeling threatened, you feel inspired. Instead of asking why them, you begin asking how can I? And that shift is powerful because it moves you from passivity to action. Now bring this into something real again, something grounded, something you've been building throughout this journey. Imagine you are still working toward your goal, building a bank balance of $500,000 by the time you turn 30. You're learning, you're growing, you're taking action, but then you see someone else, someone your age or even younger. They've already achieved what you're working toward. They have the income, the lifestyle, the results. And immediately, that feeling appears. Envy, that quiet discomfort. And in the past, you might have reacted differently. You might have doubted yourself. You might have compared your progress. You might have felt behind. But now you pause. You don't run from the feeling. You lean into it. You ask yourself, what exactly about their life do I envy? Is it their income, their freedom, their confidence, their discipline? Because once you identify that clearly, something changes. Envy becomes specific, and anything specific can be worked toward. So instead of focusing on the gap between you and them, you begin to study the path. You observe, you learn, you ask, what did they do differently? What skills did they develop? What habits do they follow? And instead of feeling discouraged, you feel informed. Because now you have direction. And that direction fuels your growth. You begin to see that their success is not a threat to yours. It's evidence that your goal is achievable. And that belief strengthens you. Because now you're not chasing something imaginary. You're moving towards something real, something proven. And as you continue to shift your perspective, something deeper begins to happen. You stop comparing timelines. Because you realize that everyone's path is different. Different starting points, different opportunities, different experiences. And comparing timelines only creates unnecessary pressure. So instead, you focus on your own journey, your own progress, your own growth, because that's where your power is. And as you do that, envy starts to lose its negative charge. It becomes neutral, even helpful, because every time it appears, it gives you information. It shows you where to focus, what to improve, what to move toward, and that transforms your relationship with it completely. Now, instead of feeling small when others succeed, you feel expanded, because their success no longer takes anything away from you. It adds perspective. It adds possibility. And this shift doesn't happen overnight. It's something you practice, because there will still be moments where comparison feels uncomfortable, moments where doubt tries to creep in, moments where you question your progress. But now, you have a different response. You catch the thought, you pause, and you reframe it. You remind yourself, if they can do it, I can learn how to do it too. And then, you take action. Because inspiration without action fades. But inspiration followed by action creates momentum. So you use that energy. You channel it. You turn it into effort, into learning, into growth. And slowly, your focus shifts from others back to yourself. Because that's where your results come from. Not from comparison, but from consistency. And as you continue this process, something begins to settle within you. A sense of confidence. Not because you are better than others, but because you are focused on becoming better than you were. And that mindset keeps you moving forward. Because now, your growth is not dependent on where others are. It's dependent on where you are going. And as that clarity deepens, as your actions continue to align with your vision, as you keep learning, improving, adapting, something begins to change externally as well. Your skills improve. Your results start to show. Your progress becomes visible. And one day, without even realizing it, you become the person someone else looks at, the person someone else compares themselves to. And in that moment, something clicks. Because you understand now, what you once envied was never out of reach. It just required time, effort, consistency, and the willingness to learn instead of compare. And as you reflect on that journey, as you see how far you've come, how much you've grown, how your mindset has shifted, you begin to feel something different. Not envy, not comparison, but appreciation. Because you understand that everyone is on their own path, moving at their own pace, learning their own lessons. And that realization brings a sense of calm, a sense of freedom. Because you are no longer measuring your life against someone else's. You are living it on your own terms. And as you continue forward, carrying this awareness with you, something powerful stays with you. Every feeling, even the uncomfortable ones, has a purpose. Every reaction can be redirected. Every moment of comparison can become a moment of clarity, if you are willing to look at it differently. And as you do, as you keep choosing growth over judgment, curiosity over comparison, inspiration over envy, your path becomes clearer. Your energy becomes lighter. Your progress becomes steady. And your life begins to reflect not just what you want, but who you are becoming. Someone who no longer feels threatened by others' success, but strengthened by it. Someone who no longer compares, but creates. And in that quiet shift, in that steady transformation, you find something deeper than motivation. You find direction. Trust is not passive, it's powerful. Letting go is not weakness, it's alignment. And the moment you stop forcing everything is the moment things start flowing. And as you carry everything you've been building, the clarity, the discipline, the resilience, the awareness, the gratitude, the ability to turn comparison into direction, you arrive at something that feels almost paradoxical, something that seems simple on the surface but is deeply challenging in practice. Trusting the process, trusting the timing, Trusting that what you are working toward is unfolding even when you cannot see immediate results. Because up until now, you've been doing, thinking, acting, adjusting, growing, and all of that matters. But there comes a point where effort alone is not enough, where pushing harder doesn't create better results, where overthinking starts to create resistance. And in that space, you're asked to trust, not blindly, not naively, but consciously. Because trust is not about believing that everything will happen exactly the way you want, exactly when you want. It's about believing that your consistent effort, your aligned behavior, your growth, your persistence are building something, even if the results are not fully visible yet. And that kind of trust requires patience, because your mind wants certainty. It wants proof. It wants guarantees. It wants to know that everything will work out before it fully commits. But life doesn't work that way. Growth doesn't work that way. Manifestation doesn't work that way. Because if everything was certain, if every step was guaranteed, there would be no need for belief, no need for courage, no need for growth. So instead of waiting for certainty, you begin to act despite uncertainty. And as you do that, you start to build a different kind of confidence, not based on outcomes, but based on trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your process. Trust that what you are building is moving you forward, even if the results take time to appear. And let's bring this back into something real again, something you've been walking through, something that now carries a deeper meaning. Imagine you are still on that journey, building toward your goal of reaching a bank balance of $500,000 by the time you turn 30. You've done the work. You've aligned your behavior. You've moved through fear. You've stayed consistent. You've learned from setbacks. And yet, there are moments where things feel slow. Moments where progress is not as visible as you expected. Moments where doubt tries to return. What if this doesn't happen? What if I'm wasting my time? What if I'm not doing enough? And this is where trust is tested. Because in those moments, your instinct is to control, to overwork, to overthink, to force results. But forcing creates resistance. Because when you are constantly trying to control every outcome, you create pressure. And pressure clouds your judgment. It leads to rushed decisions. It leads to burnout. It pulls you out of alignment. So instead of reacting that way, you pause. You take a step back. You remind yourself, I am doing the work. I am growing. I am moving forward. And then you allow things to unfold. Not by stopping your effort, but by releasing the need to control the outcome. Because there is a difference between effort and attachment. Effort is what you do. Attachment is how tightly you hold on to the result. And when you are too attached, you create anxiety. But when you combine effort with trust, you create flow. And flow is where things start to come together naturally. Opportunities appear. Connections form. Ideas come. Not because you forced them, but because you created the space for them. And this is where manifestation becomes deeper than just action. It becomes alignment. Because now, you are not just working hard. You are working in the right direction, with the right mindset, with the right energy. And that combination creates results. But trust also means accepting that things may not happen exactly as you planned. Because sometimes, what you think you want is not what you actually need. Sometimes, delays are protecting you. Sometimes, detours are guiding you. And when you trust that, when you stop resisting those moments, you begin to see them differently. Not as obstacles, but as redirections. Because your path is not always linear. It moves. It shifts. It evolves. And that's not a problem. That's part of the process. So instead of panicking when things don't go as expected, you stay grounded. You stay focused on what you can control, your actions, your effort, your mindset. And you release what you cannot, timing, outcomes, external circumstances. And that balance creates peace. Because now You are no longer fighting reality. You are working with it. And as you continue to practice this, something begins to change within you. A sense of calm, a sense of confidence, because you are no longer dependent on immediate results to feel progress. You trust that progress is happening, even when it's not visible yet. And that trust keeps you consistent. It keeps you steady. It keeps you moving forward, even when motivation fades, even when results are slow, because you are not relying on external validation. You are relying on internal belief. And that belief strengthens over time, because every time you continue despite uncertainty, you reinforce it. Every time you stay aligned despite delays, you deepen it. And slowly, it becomes part of who you are. Someone who doesn't give up easily. Someone who doesn't panic when things take time. Someone who trusts the process. And as that identity settles in, something powerful begins to happen. Your actions become more focused. Your decisions become clearer, because you are no longer reacting emotionally. You are acting intentionally, and that leads to better outcomes. Because clarity creates precision. Precision creates efficiency, and efficiency creates progress. And as you move forward, as your journey continues to unfold, as your effort compounds, your skills grow, your opportunities expand, you begin to notice that things start aligning. Not perfectly, not instantly, but steadily, in ways that feel natural, in ways that make sense. And one day, you reach that moment again. You look at your account, and you see it. $500,000. And this time, the feeling is different. Not just pride, not just excitement, but understanding, because you know what it took. Not just the actions, but the patience. Not just the effort, but the trust. Because there were moments where you couldn't see the outcome. Moments where things felt uncertain. Moments where you had to keep going without proof. And that's what made it real. Because you didn't just build wealth. You built belief. You built resilience. You built trust. And as you sit with that realization, something becomes clear. Trust was never about waiting. It was about continuing. Continuing to act. Continuing to believe. Continuing to move forward, even when you couldn't see the full picture. And as you come back to this moment, right now, where you are, still building, still growing, still becoming, you begin to feel that same trust forming within you. Not forced, not blind, but steady, because you understand now. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to control every step. You don't need immediate proof. You just need to keep showing up, keep aligning, keep moving forward, and trust that what you are building is building you in return. And in that quiet space, where effort meets patience, where action meets belief, where control softens into trust, you find something deeper than certainty. You find peace. And from that place, everything you create flows with more ease, more clarity, more meaning. Because you are no longer trying to force your life into shape. You are allowing it to unfold, step by step, in a way that feels aligned, grounded, and real. This is where everything comes together, not as an ending, but as a realization. This is where you stop searching and start becoming. And this is where you understand it was never about learning something new. It was about remembering who you can be. And as you sit with everything you've moved through, every shift in perspective, every moment of clarity, every quiet realization that changed the way you see yourself and your life, something begins to settle deeply within you, not as excitement, not as temporary motivation, but as something far more stable, a grounded sense of awareness. Because you can feel it now, can't you? That subtle but undeniable shift in the way you think, in the way you respond, in the way you see your future. You're no longer standing at the beginning, wondering what manifestation is, wondering if it works, wondering if it's even possible for you. You've moved beyond that. Now, you understand that manifestation is not a trick, not a shortcut, not a wishful way of thinking. It's a process, a way of living, a way of aligning your thoughts, your emotions, your behavior, and your identity with the life you want to create. And more importantly, you understand that it starts with you, with your clarity, with your willingness to define what you truly want, not what looks good to others, not what feels safe, but what genuinely resonates with you. Because everything changed the moment you stopped being vague and started being specific. And from that clarity, you learned to face something that once held you back without you even realizing it: fear and doubt. Not by eliminating them, but by understanding them, by seeing them for what they are: patterns, not truths. And instead of letting them decide your actions, you began to move despite them, step by step, choice by choice. And in doing that, you didn't just build courage, you built trust in yourself. And that trust carried you into your behavior, into your daily actions, into the way you show up when no one is watching, when motivation fades, when discipline is the only thing left. Because you saw clearly that your life is not shaped by what you think once, but by what you do consistently. And that realization grounded everything. It made manifestation real, practical, something you could actually live, not just imagine. And then came the moments that tested you, the setbacks, the delays, the situations that didn't go the way you expected. And instead of breaking you, they revealed something deeper. They showed you that growth is not linear, that progress is not always visible, that challenges are not there to stop you, but to shape you. And in those moments, you didn't just continue, you evolved. You became more resilient, more aware, more capable. And through that, something else quietly entered your journey: gratitude. Not forced, not conditional, but real. The kind that allows you to appreciate where you are, even while you're still building where you want to go. Because you realize that constantly chasing the future without valuing the present only creates emptiness. So you learn to balance both. To grow without losing presence. To aim higher without rejecting what already exists in your life. And that balance brought a sense of peace into your process. A stability that made everything feel more sustainable. And along the way, even emotions you once avoided, like envy, became tools. Because instead of letting comparison shrink you, you allowed it to guide you, to show you what you truly want, to point you toward possibilities instead of limitations. And that shift turned distraction into direction. And as you kept moving, as you kept aligning, as you kept becoming, you reached a point where effort alone was no longer enough, where pushing harder didn't feel right anymore. And that's where trust entered your journey. Not blind trust, not passive waiting, but active belief. Belief that your actions matter. Belief that your growth is building something. Belief that even when you cannot see the full picture, things are unfolding. And that trust changed how you experience everything. Because you are no longer anxious about timing. You are no longer desperate for immediate results. You are steady, focused, grounded. And from that place, your actions become more powerful because they are no longer driven by fear, but by alignment. And now, as everything comes together, you begin to see the bigger picture. That manifestation was never about controlling everything. It was about becoming someone who is capable of creating, handling, and sustaining the life they desire. And that person is not separate from you. It's you. Just a version of you that you've been stepping into, slowly, consistently, intentionally. And as you reflect on that, something becomes clear in a way that feels almost quiet, almost obvious. You are already on the path. You are already in the process. You are already becoming. And there is nothing more powerful than that realization. Because it removes the pressure. It removes the doubt. It replaces it with direction, with purpose, with a sense of movement that doesn't depend on external validation. And as you move forward from here, You carry something with you that cannot be taken away. Clarity in your vision, strength in your mindset, alignment in your behavior, resilience in the face of challenges, gratitude for where you are, awareness of where you are going, and trust in the process that connects it all. And with that, your life no longer feels like something that is happening to you. It feels like something you are shaping, deliberately, consistently, powerfully. And maybe, just for a moment, you pause here, not because the journey is over, but because you can finally see it clearly. How far you've come, how much you've shifted, how capable you've always been. And if something in this journey resonated with you, if something made you think differently, feel differently, see your life from a new perspective, then don't let this be where it stops. Because growth is not a one-time experience. It's something you continue, something you deepen, something you return to. So if you want more of this, more clarity, more insight, more journeys like this that help you understand yourself and shape your life in a powerful way, stay connected. Keep learning, keep expanding. And if this experience gave you value, then support it in a simple way. Share it with someone who needs it, someone who is searching, someone who is ready to grow but doesn't yet know where to begin. Because sometimes the right message at the right time changes everything. And if you want to continue exploring ideas like this, diving deeper into manifestation, mindset, and transformation, then stay with Cliffnote Chronicles. Because this is not just about listening. It's about evolving. And as you step forward from here, back into your life, back into your reality, you carry something different within you now. Not just information, not just inspiration, but a quiet certainty that the life you want is not somewhere far away. It's something you are already creating,